Good evening and welcome to another exciting edition of Education That Transforms. My name is Sandria Anderson and it gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone present here this evening who has been benefiting from our very informative programs. This evening is no exception as we have a lineup of great presenters who are very knowledgeable in the topic, your child's mental health and wellness. We have embarked on the summer holidays. Thank God for piloting us successfully through an uncharted school year with varying challenges. Yes, we did it. By God's grace, we did it. Like and share this link. Subscribe to our channel. And may God richly bless you. I invite you now to bow your heads with me as we pray.
Let us pray. Gracious, loving Father, today we are thankful for your love, thankful for your goodness, your mercies, thankful for the way in which you have kept us safely. Thankful for the fact that we are educators, Christian educators, and thank you, great God, for a week in which we can celebrate education, its virtues. And Father, the task that you have given us and other stakeholders, we do not take lightly. And so we recommit ourselves to you right now, God, to use us in the cause of education. Bless now, God, this program, I pray. Keep us steadfast, focused, and task-oriented. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
God, I give you what I can today. The scattered ashes that I hid away, I lay them all at your feet. From the corners of my deepest shame, the empty places where I worn your name, show me the love I say I believe. Help me to lay it down. Oh Lord, I lay it down. Oh, let this be where I die. My Lord, with thee crucified, and be lifted high as my kingdoms fall, once and for all, once and for all. There is victory in my Savior's loss, and in the crimson flowing from the cross. Pour over me, pour over me, yes. Oh, let this be where I die. My Lord, with thee crucified, and be lifted high as my kingdom falls, once and for all. Oh Lord, I lay it down. Oh Lord, I lay it down. Help me to lay it down. Oh Lord, I lay it down. Oh, let this be where I die, my Lord, with thee crucified, and be lifted high as my kingdoms fall, once and for all, once and for all, once and for all, once and for all.
Good evening and welcome once again to Education That Transforms. We're so delighted this evening to have our ladies in blue joining us. As a matter of fact, we have our Associate Superintendent, Ms. Doris Brown, who is our guest co-host this evening. And I will ask the other ladies to introduce themselves, but viewers, we must say thank you so much for joining us this and every Sabbath evening at 4 p.m. for Education That Transforms. We hope that you will share this link because this conversation this evening really needs to be spread among our parents, our teachers, and if we have some children who are listening, they might benefit as well. So this evening, we're going to ask our guests to introduce themselves. Two of them, well, they're not all guests. They've been on Education That Transforms before in different capacities. So I would ask you now that you would introduce yourselves for us as we begin our discussion this evening. Okay, no one wants to go first, so Sergeant Berry.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Berry. I'm a sergeant with the Miami-Dade Police Department. I currently serve as a supervisor for road response units and have experience in dealing with domestic violence and also missing persons was my specialty. I am a crisis and a hostage negotiator for our SWAT team. And it is a blessing to be with you this evening.
Well, my name is Tiffany Adams. I am a guidance and college planning counselor at a local private high school in the Central Florida area. And I am thrilled that we are having this conversation this afternoon. It's such an important topic. So thank you so much.
Hi, good evening, Southeastern Conference. I'm so excited, like Tiffany and Sergeant Barry, to be here. My name is Marlene Jiram. I'm a school social worker for Broward County Public Schools through kindergarten through 12th grade. My background is in child welfare. I've supervised for the Department and Children and Families for many years, as well as Children and Home Society. So I've done a gamut as far as with foster care, adoptions, investigations, and now I'm in the school system. So mental health is very important, and I'm so glad that we're talking about it today.
So we are here this evening because this is Mental Health Month, and we're pretty much at the end of the month. Mm-hmm. However, we do not want to go ahead and just dismiss the importance of mental health as it relates to our children. So again, we welcome all of you, thanking you so much for coming on this evening to share in this session and to give us some wealth of knowledge that you have as it relates to mental health. We do hope that you will share this link so that others can join in now in this conversation as we talk about your child's mental health and wellness. So we're going to ask this evening for Mrs. Adams and Mrs. Jaram to tell us, why did you choose this field of, counseling and mental health? Why did you choose this field of study and to give in terms of your service?
Thank you for asking that important question. I knew that I wanted to be a high school counselor since I was in middle school. And I believe that that interest, need, and desire came from a lack of resources that I had during my schooling. I felt that it would be important for me to help others, right? And I feel throughout my graduate program years ago that the best fit would be high school, because I did intern at all levels, lower, middle, and high school. I just knew that I wanted to help young people because I had a need when I was their age. And I felt like it certainly was a passion that the Lord impressed upon me.
Hey, thank you for sharing.
Okay, so I'll give you a little joke and then I'll go into it. So, in the Caribbean, everybody wants you to be a nurse or a teacher. So my parents were like, yeah, you look like a nurse, so you'll be a nurse. But we had this lady at my church, Dr. Bailey, Tesai Bailey, most of you might know her. And she actually did a discussion, and she was always involved with young people, but she actually spoke, and she spoke about what she did. And that's when I started like, oh, mental health. Let me think about that a little more. I've always been one to advocate for people. As I was very quiet when I was younger, and not so now. But so I was always advocating, though, for those who were probably being bullied or, mistreated or whatever. I come from a big family. So to me, I've always been that person looking out for the other person. And I just found a perfect fit with mental health, especially giving back to the youth.
Mm-hmm. Sergeant Barry, how does mental health play a role in your line of work?
Well, it plays a large role because a decent amount of calls that we respond to may involve someone that is what we call in crisis at the time. Whether it is a child or an adult, once you respond to calls like that, when you arrive on calls like that, it is a lot of judgment that the officer has to be able to make to decide whether that person is meeting criteria to be Baker acted. It's almost like the average officer, when we come in contact with something that's a criminal situation that's going on, being able to decipher whether you're dealing with a really bad guy or you're dealing with someone that's just having a really bad day, right? And so being specially trained, having that extra training to understand and to see the signs and recognize if someone is going into crisis or is in crisis is something that each officer has to deal with. And I will say we deal with it on a daily basis. Unfortunately, it manifested more in the community than I think is really understood. And so it has a big impact on law enforcement.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to know, ladies, and if you would tell the audience, what does mental health mean to each of you? And we would start with Ms. Adams.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Wow, this is such a broad question, but one that I love. I strongly believe that mental wellness has to do with psychological, social, emotional wellness, being able to as a citizen, right, have positive impact on the world around you, but also knowing yourself well enough to check in and say, I need help, right? There's so many variables intertwined in our daily lives. We need to make sure that we are doing those self-check-ins and looking at our families to see if they're also doing the same. I think that's important.
Ms. Jaram?
So Tiffany summed it up very well. It is your mental, it is your physical, it's your social, it's how you think, how you feel, it's how you act. So mental health, and we usually split mental health from physical health, but mental health impacts your physical health as well. And I think if people start looking at it that way, it won't be so taboo. Because if you have a good spirit, even if you're ill in the hospital, we know that if you're laughing or you're singing or different things like that, that has a positive effect on your physical aspect and your physical health. So if you think of mental health, just think of your whole being, and that's what mental health is.
Thank you.
This is a general question for either one of you. Why has it been a taboo to talk about your mental health or even admitting your need for help or something could be wrong with you? And the second part of that is it generational or cultural, or is it both?
Okay, so I would say that it's actually both, and I would actually put in spiritual as well. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we see the early churches, and it's still happening today as well, where we think of mental health as an illness or a sin, or that person must have done something, so it's their fault why it's happening. As far as cultural, a lot of times we're told, keep things in the home, or you don't talk about your business outside, so you don't reach out for help. And then when you say generational, yes, because if you look at the younger people today, they're more open or accepting as to mental health issues, whereas our parents and that were things that you didn't really talk about. So I would say it's generational, it's cultural, and spiritual as well.
And I'm glad you mentioned spiritual. If I could just jump in real quick, because I remember, my thoughts go back to Job, with what he went through. And I'm sure they thought he was going crazy with all of that. So yes, the spiritual part is in it too, whether we want to believe it or not. Yes, Tiffany, I'm sorry.
No, thank you for adding that, Dr. Davis. I believe one of the main reasons why it's been considered taboo is because, and I'm just going to speak openly about this. In our community as Black women, I have encountered many situations where Black mothers or other families from the BIPOC community, they have been very frank with their children not to tell their business outside of the home. So there is an element of protection, right, as well as a lack of trust. And I think now more so than ever, since COVID especially, now everyone is saying, you know what, something is really wrong here. I really need to figure out what this is. And it's not just physical and emotional. There is also the spiritual component. Another topic I want to bring up under this umbrella is, praying it away, right? So we certainly do want to encourage strong relationships with Jesus Christ, and we want to teach our children the same, right? What we have to realize is that sometimes medication is needed. Sometimes talking things through is important. And if a child doesn't feel validated in that space when they share, there can be withdrawal and shutting down of that child. And then now parents are at a loss. So there are so many different variables to it, but an important question, certainly, yes.
And I also wanted to add that there's also a professional or the profession that you're in can also bear or have some bearing on that and in the household. I can speak to the law enforcement profession. For so many, it's a stigma if you need to go and speak to someone, right? And that is a culture that we are trying to change specifically in my department, because it's important. Life comes with stressors, right? Whether it's a good thing, you're getting married, that's a great thing. You're having a baby, that's wonderful. You just bought your new home, great. But all of it comes with stress, right? Add that to a job that, and the educators as well, I don't know how you do in your classrooms, but also add the stresses from what the job brings on top of that, and to believe that you are an island and you are expected to handle it. You're the person that is expected when you go to that call, or when you come into that home. You're the officer and you come into that home. They look to you for all the answers. And so all of that is just packed down and packed down. And at what point do the person that everyone goes to for answers go and get answers and get relief? So sometimes by your very profession, it minimizes your ability or even willingness to reach out and say, do you see me? I need someone to talk to as well.
I just wanted to add really quick, if I may, that a lot of times I think it's taboo because we don't understand. We don't understand mental health. And so with not understanding, there comes a fear as well. So a lot of people are afraid because they don't know, what does this mean? How are people going to look at me? So I think once we start educating like you're doing today, I think that's half the battle as well.
Praise God. Thank you so much for those responses. What are some of the mental disorders that we find, in children, and what are the most common ones?
I will answer. My school in particular, actually, over the last 12 years, in both private and the public systems, I have seen ADHD honestly, like the common cold, just that's what they have. That's what they have. Instead of understanding that children, we weren't created to sit in a classroom for 8 hours and not move. We just were not. And so saying that because a child cannot sit still and not even asking, well, what did they eat this morning? Because if it was Lucky Charms, certainly, yes, the child is going to have a bit more energy, as well as they need to move. They need to move. That is what is healthy, right? So more so now than ever, in my school system, we try our best to incorporate more tech-savvy instruments so that they can actually interact more in a different way, get up, move around, go outside, do science labs outdoors. It's just, so ADHD, I would say, certainly is at the top of the list. Anxiety, depression, let's see, and then sometimes you'll see a bipolar disorder or Asperger's or autism, but those are not as common, not as common.
Right. So Tiffany mentioned anxiety, depression, ADHD. We do have autism and oppositional defiance. Those are usually the top one when you're looking at children. And I want us to understand, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention reported that 1 in 5 children before the age of 18 in the United States have a mental health diagnose or experience mental health, some kind of mental health, whether it's behavioral or whatever. So it is a real problem that we're dealing with, and we need to take it seriously.
Thank you. Now, ladies, what are some misconceptions about children and mental disorder?
Well, I know for this, a lot of kids that we see in the school system, a lot of people think they're just misbehaving. Oh, that kid is bad, or they're rude, or, they're just being disrespectful. Sometimes, especially with teenagers, because they're going through all the mood swings that comes with hormonal changes, they think, oh, they're just being a teenager. Not realizing that sometimes there's more to the behaviors than what they're seeing on the surface.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would echo the same. And then I'll even go to the opposite end where once the diagnosis has been made, now it's being used as a crutch. And so it's fine. They will progress. They will be successful. And so just offering that unconditional support is important.
So ladies, as a society, we have truly, have we truly accepted mental health as a real thing? Or do we see it as something to be ignored?
I believe that as a society, we are, our eyes are more open. I think we are seeing right now the results of individuals, children who grew up to be adults who were troubled, and they now are acting out on society in a violent way. I think for those children who slipped through the cracks in the schooling system and their parents and, didn't want to recognize that it was an issue, we are seeing the results of that. So I do believe, and thankfully, praise the Lord, we are recognizing it and talking about it. So yes.
So we've come a long way as far as with mental health. I think we still have a long way to go. A lot of times we treat individuals with mental health as criminals instead of treating them as someone with an illness. For example, if we're going to Baker Act a child, to transport the child for the school system, and I'm just talking about within the school system, most of the time that child is being transferred in a police car instead of through EMS, or they're not being transported with a mental health professional. Now, Sergeant Barry is excellent, and I've known her for many years. But, unfortunately, not everyone is going to be Sergeant Barry. And so a lot of times, unfortunately, we look at the behavior as a criminal behavior rather than an illness. And if we start looking at it that way, I think we'll do a lot better. So we need to change the narrative a little bit.
And I think that is so important, why that officers do receive that additional training. It is a mandatory thing for my department, and I think probably most departments, the CIT training. And so it gives them another layer, another skill to deal with those types of situations, because it does take a different approach, right? Someone that's already in crisis or that's already at a high, an officer can't come in and match that high. They have to be able to de-escalate that situation and get that child comfortable and change the narrative and the environment that's going on in order to get the child the help that they need. So that again confirms the importance in really being trained and taught to understand and recognize the signs.
Mental health seems to be something that most people are ashamed of. As a result, some warning signs are dismissed in children because parents are not readily going to believe that their child has a mental disorder or mental issue. How dangerous could this be?
It can be deadly. The warning signs specifically is the isolation, a child wearing long sleeve, everything covering up, right? Everything's covered up. Mm-hmm. And when they accidentally reach for something, you see the cuts, right? You see the scars. So they have made attempts on their lives. And I think one of the most important things is just to keep those lines of communication open with your child, judgment-free, as well as reaching out to the counselor at the school and the teachers to see if they've picked up on anything, right? Is the child sitting in the back in the corner with their hoodie on their phone the entire time? You definitely want to use the resources around you, but also, it's okay to check their room for things. It's okay. Hey, may I see your cell phone? That's okay too. So checking in with them, building that trust and keeping the communication open.
Tiffany. Absolutely. We know that suicide is the second leading cause of death when it comes to young people at ages 10 to 24. So that alone tells you that we're missing something. We're losing our children because we're missing the signs, or we're ignoring the behaviors, or we're not reaching out to the proper professionals to get that child help. Sad to say, but just today I was dealing with a situation where this child expressed to someone about suicidal ideations. It was repeated over a span of time. When they reached out, because I was like, no, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And when they reached out to the parent refused services. No, my kid is just acting up. I know my kid, this and that. And I had to say, I understand that you know your child. However, if they're just seeking attention, so be it. But let's err on the side of caution and let's, get an assessment. It might be nothing, but if this child is constantly saying something, then you need to see this child is crying out for help. And a lot of times we don't see it that way. We think they're just seeking attention or misbehaving or whatever the case is, or you're embarrassed to admit that your child needs help or whatever's going on. But it's better that you get that child the help because they're crying out for help than to end up with a child who you have to bury.
Wow, that's such a, yes, that's real deep. And it does happen like that. Parents don't want to admit that something is wrong. And it's a sad situation for the student. So what are some of the mental disorders in children that are usually overlooked and dismissed as something else? What are some of them?
So we usually, go ahead, Sergeant Barry.
I can only use, I have a current example. And again, this is not from a standpoint of the counselors who know this much better than I do, but just from something that I saw on the road where the mom basically expressed that she has two children. One of them was always a challenge in school, always getting into trouble. That was the one that she'd get the calls on all the time, where the other child was very quiet, never had a problem with him, mixing with friends, the straight A student doing very well. So she kind of, all of the attention was turned to the troubled child, or the child that they considered to be the problem. However, what happened was, as these children now got into high school age, it now was obvious that the quiet child, the child that seemingly had it all together, had definitely had social issues, didn't mix with people. And so where there was an obvious sign of the other child given issues, the child that actually had a mental disorder was the quiet child. So sometimes parents confuse things that are age-appropriate behaviors and just thank God to have that quiet child. The child doesn't give any problems. I don't have to pay attention to that, but she missed it. And unfortunately, that young man went through a whole series and continues to go through a series of very, very destructive behavior. So it can be missed if you don't want to deal with it. And not necessarily don't want to deal with it, but not willing to recognize that, could this be my child? Could this be happening to him? Or is it just me?
That's so true. A lot of times we don't look at the child who is the perfectionist. And a lot of times with that perfectionist, that mentality, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And we often overlook that because we think, oh, they're doing great in school, everything's perfect. But they usually have a lot of stress. And as parents, a lot of times we tend to overlook that. because we're like, what could you possibly be stressed about? You're a little child. And so I would say that's one of the main disorders that we overlook with children is stress and anxiety. And if you just think about the past 2 years that we've had, I don't know how many schools or churches or individuals have actually sat down with their young people to do a spot check to see how they're doing emotionally, mentally. All of the violence and the pandemic, all of the unknowns, have we sat and said, how are you feeling? What's going on with you? What do you think about this? Because whether it's happening to them directly or indirectly, it affects them. You know, we have that secondhand trauma. And we talk about, I think with society, we talk about the adverse childhood experience and the adverse community experience. And we know that if a child is exposed to violence, not even if it's happening to them, but if they witness it, if they see it, if it's on social media, that affects them. And a lot of times we don't look at those things, and it develops stress and anxiety and panic attacks. And those are some of the things that we're dealing with now, especially in the school system.
If I may add, on that same vein, I would just like to caution parents. What happens is we wonder how sometimes adults grow up and they're like the busybody, they're like ADHD and so forth. But let's look back at their childhood. There are a lot of parents who believe that every waking hour of the day, the child must be involved in something. And so we get them into these clubs, we get them into all these activities after school. Then we pick them up later on. They're tired, they're exhausted. Then the cycle starts back again the next day. Then we expect them to go out into society and function well. How can they when they're used to a life where they just get up and go, get up and go? You have this meeting at that time to go do something, swimming, whatever it is. Not to say they shouldn't have activities. All those are good, but there must also be a balance with our students. And some parents fuss with teachers if they don't get a whole bunch of homework for the kids. Homework is to be a continuation of classwork. No, new material should never be introduced for homework. For kindergartners going home with these big backpacks, burdening them down, it's crazy. So sometimes as adults, we contribute toward the children and their mental disorders without even realizing. And so here it is now, they're wondering, why are they doing all that they're doing now? It's because of the pattern that was set for them. So we have to be careful because we also believe that, oh, my child is gifted, my child is, I've been on both sides of the fence, public school and our private schools. And let me say this, a child doing very, very well in a grade level does not necessarily mean that the child will go to another grade level and do just as well. I believe parents need to let children grow, enjoy their educational journey. If a child is gifted, the child, you will know without trying to do anything extra because it will come out. For some reason in their performance, everything, it will show up. We have to be careful as adults when we have children under, in our control. We need to be careful what we do, how much we do, and what is expected of them, because that too can contribute to how they grow up and how much stress and pressure they have to deal with. They're little people. They do have worry, they do have stresses. Let's not compound it with the things that we add to them, especially the things that are unnecessary.
That's so true. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Now, ladies, is mental health hereditary, do you think? You're muted.
So I will tell you, for most of it, it's not hereditary. It's a lot of chemical imbalance and different things like that that we look at. I know people usually, especially back in the days, would say, oh, this one's that way, or they might be this way because their aunt or their uncle was X, Y, and Z, or had this disorder. But that's not necessarily the case. A lot of it is chemical imbalance. And also remember that mental health is a wide range of different disorders. So it really depends on what disorder we're looking at as well.
Okay.
I'd like to go back to the point that Dr. Davis just made, if I may, to talk about little people, right? And the added pressure. I think this is such a critical point. I had a young man that came in this week to the school. I'll share this story with you. He just came in to take a placement test to figure out which mathematics class he needs to enroll in, and he'll be a 9th grader. Halfway through the test, he didn't seem to be okay. And I continued to check on him every 20 minutes or so. And the last time I went in to talk to him, he had a complete breakdown. He started weeping, hyperventilating, couldn't catch his breath. He was terrified that he was not going to perform well and his father would be upset with him. He was in 8th grade. I mean, a baby. You know, I think about that, and I think about a chilling 22-minute audio message I listened to on Christmas Eve from one of my students whose mom demands nothing less than straight A's. And it really hurts my heart to know that that's happening. You know, as little people, I think we need to be in the business of protecting their hearts, right? And the college acceptances and career goals that you have for them and that they have for themselves, it will work out according to God's plan. It will. Thank you.
Your story. Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Dr. Davis will know that I am guilty of that. So I don't want the parents to think that we're beating up on them for wanting their child to achieve or whatever. That's not what we're saying. But I also had to, as a parent, know to back up a little bit, because I told my child, I did. I'm a mental health professional, and I'm going to be honest. I told my child, you have 9 A's in your name, so therefore that's what I want to see. And that was from since small. So later on, I realized, you know what? I need to fix that statement, because then I started seeing her like pressuring herself to make sure she got the grade. And I was like, you know what? No, just do your best. Whatever your best is, it's okay. And I think that's the difference we have to come to realize, because especially in our culture, in our ethnicity, because we've always had to be 2 steps ahead, we try to push our children to do even better. And it's so important what you're saying, because the pressure, we don't realize how much pressure we're actually putting them under. So parents, you know, yes, have the expectations, but just balance it out a bit.
I've heard in the classroom so often when students look at their grades and they look and they go, wow, my mom's going to kill me, or my dad's going to kill me. And it might not be really kill, but it's just what's going to happen when they get home. So that fear that they carry to the classroom, it's a serious thing.
And some children, they really feel like they're going to die. I was a little girl in primary school. In Jamaica, we call elementary school primary school. And we were taking the common entrance exam. A friend of mine, she came in that morning, brand new shoes. But you know what? She was crying. And, you know, at that time, as children, you don't understand. Now I understand. She said that her mom says she bought her this pair of shoes for her to go to take her exam in a new pair of shoes, and she better pass the exam. Needless to say, she didn't do well at all. What happened, I don't know, But what a pressure.
Mm-hmm.
We have some children who get sick, faint away. I mean, I saw that in public school in the recent years. I left public school maybe about 14 or so years ago. But children came in and they're hyperventilating, they're passing out because it's exam time. That should never happen to students. It should never happen. And so we just have to be careful. As long as they're doing their best. You have some students, a B is their best. What do you do with it? God bless her soul, Rita Pearson, one of those strong educators. I remember in one of her TED Talk where she talked about the child miss 18 out of 20. She did a +2 and she put a smiley face and the child was wondering, didn't I? She said, yeah, but you know what? You didn't do all that bad. You at least got 2. Don't you think next time you can do better? And I'm like, wow. If every one of us would enter the classroom or would deal with students like that, do you know how much more better they would be? Yes, some of them will clown around. They don't want to do anything. That's totally different. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about when they're doing their best. If it's not an A, if it's a B, it's still their best. And so let us be careful. And as educators also, I'm speaking to my educators in class, don't compare your children one with the other. Comparing students one with the other is one of the worst things we could do. Because that child, we don't know what they're going through, why their grades are not the way it should be, and so forth. There goes the story of Teddy Stallard. If you all hear about it, with Miss Thompson, his teacher. So let's just understand that they're little people. And I will always say that. Anybody who knows me will know that I say, children are little people. They do have their pressures. They do go through these emotions and everything. Let's be careful how we deal with them. So the next question would be, do you find that mental health, some of the disorders are manifested more in a certain age group or a certain gender or a specific gender?
I have found that I will certainly see more body dysmorphia, right? Where you look in the mirror and you see something different staring back at you in young ladies, right? So there is a lot of comparison to each other, to their peers. I can certainly say I've seen more of that in young ladies over young men, but it's really hard to determine between genders because many times, young boys are taught not to cry or show emotion or, talk about their problems. So right off the bat, if I had to pick one, I would say it's more so in females. And that's just based on the way that the training is happening right now. As far as age group, oh my goodness, it's starting younger and younger. And I think that is a direct correlation of technology. There is certainly overlap in, now lower school students, 2nd, 3rd grade, 1st grade, they have access to smartphones. And so with the increase in time online and connecting with any and everyone and friends and that type of thing, I would say it's starting younger. But previously, I would say, no, I can't even say that. I'll let it's just across the board. Mm-hmm.
So typically we know between 18 to 25 is usually where we see a lot of it. I guess it has to do with a lot of the pressure of what's to come next, whether it's college or, what career path they're going to take. So we see an increase. Also, usually around puberty is when we tend to see a lot more disorders. But like Tiffany said, we're seeing younger and younger kids with mental health problems. She mentioned about the boys not expressing themselves. And that's one of the main things that we've been working on lately is the social emotional learning and the zones of regulations and how do you express what you're feeling rather than lashing out. We have little ones who are flipping over desks or saying they want to kill themselves because they don't know how to express their feelings. Because we tell them, you're a guy, so toughen up and get over it, or men don't cry, or whatever the case may be. And, you know, their little bodies, they have to do something with all of what's going on inside. So they flip over a desk. And, you know, it's sad because this year we've dealt with so many suicidal ideations and attempts from kindergartners. You know, before we were like, no, it's the older students, we'll just deal with them. But now we're looking at the babies who are having problems. So it's across the board, even though we see 18 to 25, primarily females, it's across the board.
And what I've seen is with the younger population that we deal with, sometimes they're mirroring, right? They're expressing some behaviors and some things that they're getting from their environments when they're at home. And then you will see parents that call because their young person have just returned from school. They went through high school, you know, elementary, junior, high school, and everything seems normal. And they go and their first semester in college, all of a sudden, there's some things that's manifesting itself. And so some things that might have been masked or missed while they were in a regular, normal environment, what they're used to, once they're sent away, especially if they go away, and the environment is different, and all of a sudden there's some freedoms that they didn't have at home. Some of these things tend to manifest itself, and sometimes it's mental illness, and sometimes it's adjustments. But I agree with both of the ladies that we're seeing it in younger children, and I'm seeing it in first year college students as well.
What are some barriers that we find in schools when dealing with children's mental health?
I would say the lack of resources, right? So, you know, let's say you finally get to a point where the parents are on board, right? And they recognize, yes, my child has a problem. You know, my hope is that that state and that county or that school has the resources to help that child, but sometimes they do not, right? And it's almost a dead end situation. So that I would say finances could be a barrier. And sometimes the barrier is the parent, as we discussed before, with the lack of recognizing that there is a concern.
That's so true. Along with that, we have a lot of, to remember, socioeconomics play a major role in accessing certain services. You know, in our country, we know that healthcare is expensive. And if you don't have good insurance, then you're not going to be able to get certain services. So that's a problem. Sometimes in the school system, the parents don't know the right questions to ask. You know, they might see that their child is struggling, but they don't know the proper channels to go through. And so unless you have a teacher who picks up on it or someone who sees the child and realizes, a lot of times they get overlooked. It's important for parents to know, especially in Florida, that they do have the CPST team, which is a collaboration of different professionals who look and see whether it's academic or behaviors and put in the RTI, which is the response to interventions, and try to see what's happening with that child. If they get, and they have three different tiers, which is, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 3 being the most severe. And if that child doesn't show improvement with the interventions that were put in place, then they can get an evaluation. Also, if a parent sees something that they think needs to be evaluated right away, whether they're in private or public school, they can request for an evaluation, and that school will have to honor it as well.
Okay, so what are some of, you talked about resources not being, that can be barriers for children in school with mental health, but are there any kind of services that parents are able to get for, the child who is suffering, or, the parent themselves who really need some help? Because, a parent dealing with a child with mental health, they too need some help. So are there any services available?
So there are different services depending on what the disorder is or what the concern is. So I would say, first of all, reach out to, whether they're in school, reach out to the school counselor, reach out to the social worker. If you don't have access to that, reach out to the pediatrician. If it's an older person, reach out to your physician, because they can refer you as well to a mental health professional or to an agency. But I will give you a couple of them. So if you think your child is having suicidal ideations or made certain comments or different things, you can, even for a child, they could do this on their own as well. If they just want to talk to somebody, they could call the National Suicide Prevention Helpline, which is 1-800-273-TALK. So it's 1-800-273-TALK, or you could dial 1-800-273-8255. We also have the National Helpline for Autism, and that number is 800-3 and the word autism, AUTISM, or 800-328-878476. I'm mixing up my numbers. 800-328-8476, and that's for the National Helpline for Autism. We also have a crisis text line, because, the young people, they don't really want to call and talk to somebody. They prefer to text. So if you want to text, you can do that as well. And that number is 741-741. You just text 741-741. And there's a lot of different things. I think as social workers, we usually use 211. 211 is like a resource number, a directory, per se, where you can call and you can tell them what the concern is, what you're looking for, and they could also steer you in the right direction.
Thanks so much for sharing that.
In general, does mental health disorder usually affect a child's cognitive ability?
Yes, there are certain challenges, mental challenges that they can carry over to the cognitive ability, whether it be, the ADHD, so they can't sit still. So you think that they're deficient cognitively, but they're not, So I think really and truly it's a combination of, well, how many students are in that class with the student who has the mental challenge, right? A learning challenge. What type of support is the child getting after school? I think about that. There is some overlap, but it really just depends on the type of mental health challenge.
I just want the parents to know we're talking about mental health, and we're not saying, a lot of parents think that means to medicate your child. And that's not the case, because you can do different things. There's different therapy, there's different behavioral programs, different things that you can use. Your diet could change, different things like that. So it's a lot more depending on what the disability is. And so I don't want them to walk away thinking that that's what we're trying to do. But what we're trying to do is make them aware as to what is out there and not to overlook some of the warning signs. Because if you catch it early enough, then, you could start putting those interventions in place. And who knows, early detection is always key.
How often, Sergeant Berry, are children brought in for some mental disorder related issues? How often do you see that happening?
Well, actually, the officer would be the one that would respond to a scene. Before we had enough Miami-Dade school police in place, we would get all of those calls, right? So we might get 5-year-old throwing things or tearing up the office. Sometimes we would get parent on scene. So a situation where not even the parent can control the behavior that's happening at the time, the crisis that the child is in at the time. I would say if I had to choose a number, it's not unusual for us to be called out on something like that several times a week. And it manifests in many different ways. It can be a runaway that we're dealing with. And like one of the counselors mentioned, where you would see, I think it was Tiffany, where you might, when you find that child, you'll find scarring on the arm. So, you're dealing with someone that is a cutter. They might be running away or trying to avoid certain situations, their environment at home, being bullied at school. All of these different things is going to build into some sort of behavioral pattern. And again, being able to identify whether that is normal behavior, normal reaction, age-appropriate behavior for the totality of the circumstance, or whether there is something going on, a chemical imbalance or something like that, where the child is acting out or showing some of these signs. So I would say that the officers deal with this fairly regularly during any particular work week. Also, unfortunately, dealing with homelessness. There's a lot of mental illness amongst our homeless, right? And one of the things, I am the liaison for the homeless census. And so twice a year, I have to sort of, have the officers look to see if there's any homeless out there, if they need assistance, so on and so forth. But what we look for in particular is, are there any children that's also out there in a homeless situation? And that, I think my sister said something about nurture versus nature. All of these are things that will be impactful on especially a young child that's still in that developmental stage. If they're homeless, if getting a regular meal is not a promised thing for them, if they're being bullied, if they're feeling stressors from the home, all of these are different things that we respond to, and some of it results in them going into some level of crisis.
Okay. What are some signs that teachers need to look out for?
I would say if the child is, sometimes it can show through the academic progress, right? If they're not turning in work, if they're not, for example, the last year we had to log in to class virtually, if they're not coming to class, if they're coming to class but not turning their camera on, they're not participating actively. I've had a teacher actually just came to see me this week, and it's heartbreaking. One of my students had in his school folder the official paperwork of his parents' divorce. Don't ask me how he got it, just sitting there. And he's devastated, so there are things that pop up, whether it be through academics or observation, just looking to see, okay, are the clothes clean that you're wearing to school every day? Do you have lunch? Are you eating? Do you have friends? right? Are you connecting with your peers on campus? So what we have at my school, well, in the state of Florida, really, we are reporters. In Florida, there's no, I think maybe, no. We see something, we say something in Florida by law. So yes, those are some of the things there that I would look out for.
And just be vigilant, keep an eye on the verbal and nonverbal cues that your students are giving you. You're in the classroom with them, you probably spend more time with them than their own parents. Mm-hmm. So you get to know their personalities, you get to know, their little quirky behaviors, when something doesn't seem right. So I would say go with your gut feelings and just pick up on those things and have that open conversation. Let them know they could talk to you. And if you need to act on it, like Tiffany said, then you go ahead and act on it.
Okay, so I'd like to find out, ladies, are there preventable measures that can be taken to decrease mental disorder in children?
So some of the mental health disorders you cannot foresee or you cannot do something about because, like I said, some of it is chemical imbalance and things like that. But I would say for teachers and parents or for anyone dealing with young people, it's important to let them know that they are loved unconditionally, give them a voice, allow them to speak. Listen to what they're saying. A lot of times we talk to the kids where we're talking at them and we're not listening to hear what they're really telling us. Allow them to be kids. They're still children. We put so much pressure, like we stated earlier. Allow them to have that downtime. Limit some of the social media. Model some of the behaviors that you want to see. Let our little boys know it's okay to cry. It's okay to express your feelings. It's even okay to say you're angry. But what does that mean? How do you act when you're in those situations? As adults, we don't apologize a lot of times when we do something wrong to a child, or we make a mistake. So how are we expecting them then to turn around and do that? So a lot of it is modeling behaviors. A lot of it is staying calm. If you overreact every time a child tells you something, then guess what? I'm not going to say anything because I know what your reaction is going to be. So in order for us to keep that communication open, we have to be approachable. And I think also for the adults, I would say take time for yourself as well. Show the child that you also need self-care so they will learn what self-care is. If you do yoga, meditation, whatever the case is, include them in that as well. So they see sometimes it's okay to disconnect and, get it together and then go back out into the world. Because hear what? If you're dealing with young children, and some of them are a handful, I'm not going to say everybody's perfect, but if you don't have it within you to give to them, then you're going to just make the situation worse. So those are some of the tips. And then, of course, the sunlight, the health, the sleep, the diet, all of the things that we talk about, even within our church, just promotes a healthier lifestyle for the children.
Thank you.
Anything else to add? The last question, I know Ms. Charam touched on that. What advice do you have for parents who are watching and have no knowledge of mental disorders and what to look for? I know you touched on some of that. Anything to add?
I think it's important to, in addition to everything we shared today, to think about who your child's role models are, right? So role models and mentors play a huge part in young people's lives. And oftentimes when we talk about role models and mentors, immediately my students go to, oh, well, this celebrity, this person, that actor. It's like, okay, sure, yes. But also you need to have someone that you can actually sit down and have a conversation with, right? Someone you trust, someone who, whether it be an aunt or an older sibling or a church member, someone that your child can go to for advice, for additional and extra love and mentorship. And that's important. I think it's critical for parents to use their resources they have at school. There's so much available in the school system, depending on where you are in the world. But I would highly recommend just leaning into the school system and the resources that are available. And prayer. Pray, pray, pray. Because in this world, there's only so much that we can control. But we know that we serve an awesome God. So just prayer as well.
And I would just like to add that, it's okay if you don't know or you don't understand, right? If you see something that doesn't make sense to you, it's okay as a parent to say, I don't understand this. And as Tiffany's saying, reach out. In addition to all of those things that Marlene listed and what Tiffany said, it's okay if we don't have the answer. And it's okay to reach out and say, I'm concerned about my child for X, Y, Z reason. And sometimes you might have another parent that's dealing with something that's similar, that may have found a resource, like Tiffany said, that can be helpful to you. So there is no shame, right? God made us, we said we are wonderfully made, right? He doesn't make mistakes. We're all unique, avoiding that comparison trap. So if your child is struggling with something, it's okay. And that child needs to know that it's okay to come to you and say, I'm struggling with this, and feel comfortable enough because you've let those doors of communication be open, where they can come to you or you can go and say, I need help. That's okay.
Thank you.
Ladies, you have done so well, and I'm so happy that you were able to join us this evening, as this is the last week of for the Mental Health Month. I am hoping and praying that our parents, our teachers, our Sabbath school teachers, that you're listening, that you got some information that will help you as you work with your children, work with your students. I mean, I know I've learned quite a bit, and I hope that you have, as an audience, you have as well. We hope by God's grace that we don't have to deal with crisis, every time concerning our children or students. We also pray, God, that our children will stay in good health, that they will be okay at the end of it all. So we pray that this program was of some great help and resource to you in terms of what mental disorders are for children, how we can work with the child or the children, and how we can better understand what's going on with them. So by God's grace, we just want to say that we hope that you did learn quite a bit. I've learned some, and I know that we've all learned from each other in this panel this evening. Thank you so much again, ladies. God bless all of you. I do believe that our guest co-host, our associate superintendent, did very well this evening with us. And so we look forward to having her on again as a guest co-host for us. So ladies, you're welcome to join us again anytime as we deal with children, their mental health, and whatever other issue that we might have to deal with concerning our children. Parents, the summer months are coming on, and while we're not yet out of the pandemic, they're opening up in various places. I do ask that you be very cautious, that you be the watchman over your child, that they are placed in a safe environment, that you know who is over your child, your children. You don't just drop them off at any place because you want them out of the house or because they want to get engaged in activities. Please be careful as you move around, as you allow them to socialize. Know who they're with, know what they're doing. just be careful with your children. And so by God's grace, we hope that everyone will have a very good summer in terms of our children now being out of school, most of them. Public school might not be out as yet. Am I correct, ladies? Not as yet. We're just so special in our Adventist system that we're out as of this week. So we thank God for that. But parents, we ask that you will choose wisely in terms of activities for your children. Some of our schools are having summer camps. Please sort them out. Some of our churches are having summer camps. Please sort them out and do your best just to make sure that your children are in the best environment this summer, and that by God's grace, they will start the new school year great. We will have another special edition of Education That Transforms next week. We hope to see you at 4 p.m. Until then, may God bless you. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm not sure if there's a final word from anyone. If there is, now is the time.
I'd just like to say, parents, thank God for Seventh-day Adventist Christian education, because the classrooms are smaller, the teachers are more sensitive to the needs of your child. Because the classrooms are small, they observe a whole lot more than if they were in a larger classroom. And at least they can pray with families, they can pray with the children. And students are also learning to pray with and for each other. And I think that's a blessing that we gain from Seventh-day Adventist Christian education. So let's keep that going in your homes, and God will continue to bless you as well.
Amen. Amen. Thanks so much for that plug for Adventist education. Yes. So again, ladies, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We invite our viewers to be back next week at 4 p.m. for Education That Transforms. Not only will we have Education That Transforms, but we will have our virtual graduation for the entire Southeastern Conference for all of our children, all of our students who have graduated, or adults as well who have finished college or university. We're just celebrating everyone. Next Sabbath, we hope to begin at 7 p.m. right here on SEC TV. Our commencement speaker will be none other than Dr. Johnson Cesar. So please make it a point of duty to be here on SEC TV starting at 4 p.m. with Education That Transforms. Again, ladies, thank you so much for sharing in the special edition with us. May God bless you. Until next week, we'll see you then.
Coronavirus. 5 things kids need to know. Number 1, wash your hands for 20 seconds. Sing a short song while you scrub. Number 2, visit your friends from home. Ask your parents about a play date using the phone or computer. Number 3, masks are safe, not scary. They help protect people from germs. Number 4, cover your cough or sneeze. Use your elbow or a tissue. Be sure to wash your hands too. Number 5, be a good helper. Don't forget to clean up after yourself. Remember, it's okay to ask questions. Asking questions can help you feel better. Thanks for watching.